This is a very bizarre experience because I've been presenting into a Zoom for so many years at this point. Keep looking for like speaker mode, but anyway, we have actual people here. Thank you for being with us today and for opening. This is our first program of the IFPDA Print Fair. And we're excited to be back in person. I really want to thank our partners at First Dibs for putting together this conversation. What do designers really know about art? And I know that the answer to that is a lot, quite a bit with this group. We're honored to have with us today Anthony Barzilay Freund and this group of design luminaries, Jamie Drake, Joy Moyler, and John Gachot. As First Dibs editorial director, Tony oversees all digital and print content, including First Dibs' weekly introspective magazine, which is a great read, and the First Dibs 50, an annual celebration of interior design's most compelling talents. He also serves as First Dibs director of fine art. Prior to joining First Dibs in 2010, Freund was editor-in-chief of Art and Auction magazine, and before that, the longtime arts and culture editor at Town & Country. And he began his career at Esquire. I didn't know that. A graduate of Columbia University, Tony also attended Columbia's Graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. So he is a man of impeccable taste and many expertise. And with that, I'm going to hand over this mic to Tony, and thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. I'm going to... So hello, can you hear me? Yes, I've got this set. So thank you, Jenny. Thank you, IFPDA, for letting us do this amazing panel, bring these incredible design talents here today. This is a really amazing trio, as you know. They not only have a masterful grasp of beauty, luxury, and comfort, but they bring an intelligence, ambition, and open-mindedness to their work, which I would venture to say is artful or an art form in itself. Okay, before briefly setting the stage for our conversation today, I'm going to formally introduce them. All three of them, in addition to being great friends of First Dibs, are AD 100 and Elle Décor A-List honorees. I say that now because it's in all their official bios, and but I'm have to say it, and it's a real statement of their stature in the industry. I'm just going to say it now efficiently. These are important designers. So we're going to start with Joy in the middle. Joy Moyler's love of color and textiles are embedded in her DNA. From collecting fabric swatches for her mom to make quilts, to spending countless hours at Barney's as a child, poring over wools and cashmere while watching her dad and grandfather being fitted for suits, Joy thinks of texture, haberdashery, and haute couture detailing as the second skin to architecture and interior design. Veranda Magazine's design contributing editor, Joy has a BS in architecture, and before launching her own business, she accrued more than 20 years of experience working for some of New York's most prominent architectural and interior firms. Among them, John Saladino, Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, Cohn Peterson Fox, and Terry Despont. She also oversaw store design for Ralph Lauren and was head of the Giorgio Armani Interior Design Studio. Though she's New York-based, Joy boasts a diverse range of international residential, retail, hospitality, and commercial projects, and an A-list celebrity clientele on both coasts. Welcome, Joy. John Gachot. We actually have a very alliterative group, John, Joy, and Jamie. John Gachot has been working as an interior architect and designer in New York City since 1996, leading the design and project development of high-end residential, retail, commercial, and restaurant spaces. His experience spans branding and conceptual design to architectural fruition. Prior to launching the eponymous studio Gachot, John worked at several prominent ateliers, including Studio Sofield as a senior designer and Thad Hayes as design director. John's work includes private residences as well as commercial hospitality projects in the United States and Caribbean, as well as extensive furniture design and product design, such as Gachot's fixtures and fittings lines for Waterworks. And then directly to my left is Jamie Drake, who's co-founder of the award-winning multidisciplinary interior design firm Drake Anderson. Lauded for his exuberant design sensibility and his ability to distill his vast knowledge of periods and styles with discriminating connoisseurship, Jamie creates environments that are both glamorous and eloquent, yet always interpreted through the unique prism of each client and assembled with a sense of contemporary comfort. With an illustrious career spanning 40-plus years, Jamie is equally adept at appointing a cosmopolitan, lath-sheathed penthouse, a sprawling oceanfront estate, or such commercial interiors as private foundations and state-of-the-art medical facilities. Many of his remarkable residential projects are captured in the new book, Bold, The Interiors of Drake Anderson, published by Rizzoli. We recently ran a story on one of the book's featured projects, a glamorous Upper East Side pied-à-terre. So when this talk is done, you can read the story on your phones and then click through to the Rizzoli storefront and buy a book. So that's a shameless plug for the book, but I think I have to tell you something that's really important, a really salient characteristic of Jamie. He's a real philanthropist. He's a real force in the field of doing good in the design industry. He's currently serves on the board of the Alpha Workshops, the New York Community Trust, Kips Bay Boys and Girls Club, and Parsons School of Design. He is vice chair of the Kips Bay Decorator Show House, which benefits the Kips Bay Boys and Girls Club, and he's an avid supporter of Housing Works and its Design on a Dime fundraiser. So he's not just a designer and art lover, but he's a wonderful, generous human being, much beloved, as are all three of my panelists here today. Okay, so I'm going to hold this. Okay, is that better now? Can you hear me? Okay. I've also been just doing Zooms. Okay, so now I'm going to set the scene a little. Before I joined First Dibs as editorial director in 2010, I was the editor of Art and Auction magazine, which no longer exists, alas. But at the time, it was an influential chronicle of the high-end art market. My tenure at the magazine coincided with the opening up of the art world, which was mostly a rarefied and closed ecosystem. But with the explosion of art fairs as public spectacle, Art Basel Miami Beach launched in 2002, and the newfound focus on contemporary art and the charismatic characters who were making it, the world of collecting was quickly democratized. At the time, I thought that this was a great opportunity to grow the magazine's audience beyond art world professionals and top collectors, and I continued in this belief when I joined First Dibs as the editor, and where I also helped launch a fine art vertical on the site, which at that point primarily sold vintage and antique furniture. We also had a small but mighty jewelry and fashion marketplace. But the truth of the matter is the art world had a love-hate relationship with this democratization and with digital access, which brought them a new, larger audience, sure, but it threatened their roles as gatekeepers and tastemakers. So back in 2011, when First Dibs launched its art vertical, there was this idea that design lovers, no matter how deep their pockets or refined their eye, weren't necessarily the right audience for art galleries to be courting, and that a site that sold mid-century modern Swedish chairs, Italian lighting, and, God forbid, vintage Hermes bags was not the neighborhood they wanted to live in, Tony though it might be. So times have changed, but I think there's still a lingering snobbery about design, and by extension, interior designers, which is why we've somewhat cheekily named this talk, What Do Designers Really Know About Art?, which can be read as a question asked in earnest, and also somewhat of a put-down, depending on how you emphasize the words. So as Jenny said, I think our panelists today will prove that they actually know quite a bit about the subject, and that they bring a unique perspective to collecting, and perhaps more importantly, living with artworks, because collecting art should be life-enhancing, no? So I'm going to start with basically a question just I'm going to pose to each of you, which is, what's your personal relationship to art? And if you'd like to also share, what has been the art world's relationship to you as a designer? And I can start with Jamie, maybe?
Thank you, Joy. Very kind
You're
of
right
you.
there.
So generous, my friend here. You can start.
Oh, you can start. How about you, Joe? Would you like to?
I love art, and I'm passionate about art, and I was raised immersed in it. My mother was a painter. She went to the Yale Art School in the 40s when it was the only co-ed school at Yale. And my father was in the printing business, which had an art department. And so I was always creating art, always around art, taken to galleries, museums, and fairs. And that continues to this day. I love to go and see what's new, to see what's old, to look at things again, to find new things, and to luckily occasionally get to buy some things and guide some clients to purchase things for themselves.
Am I on? Yeah. My relationship with art, I'm a native New Yorker, and my parents both worked. And so my initial relationship with art was that it was my babysitter, because my sister and I would often spend our times at the famed Metropolitan Museum of Art to sort of kill time until our parents got home from work, that along with the Natural History Museum. And so we would just wander around the Metropolitan, just kind of gazing and learning anything we could about the masters and contemporary art and Egyptian artifacts, which I also consider an art form. And I just, from those moments at the age of probably 10, 11, that sort of began my fancy and love of art of all disciplines. And I love it today, and I love purchasing it for clients and just enjoying it myself.
Thank you. John?
I started, my parents were both artists, and I also trained as an artist. In fact, I have a degree in fine arts, not architecture. And it was through my experience in the art world that I actually learned to get into interior design and know that that was actually a real position out there. My uncle who was an architect and a grandfather who was an architect as well. And so I was always interested in that, but I think the need to create and put things together helped push me getting into the applied arts of interior design and architecture. Just that need to be able to keep creating and making things. So I've been immersed in it since I was a little guy.
So you all have you've all been looking at things, looking at art since very early age.
Kind of takes over your life to a point.
Well, it has taken over your life. It's all you do now. You're just looking at beauty and creating beauty. How much is art a part of, what role does art play in your design schemes? When does it come into your thinking, and how much are you thinking about it in any given project?
I think often a client is a collector or has a very important piece that they would like to have present in the home, perhaps in a very, very visible location. And often the room is sort of designed around that art. If not completely designed, there's definitely a linkage and a connection to the piece. So it kind of starts there. Oftentimes, sometimes the room sort of dictates the type of art or sculpture which will be used. And I think the tone of the art is extremely important in how a room feels, particularly if it is a very large piece of art that tends to dominate the space.
I use art as an inspiration for a lot of what we do. I mean, so much of what Christine and I do on the weekends to go see things other than the work that we're always currently working on is get inspiration. And so it could be an old master, it could be the Alex Katz show or something like that. Could inspire a palette or a shape or something you see in paint. I personally love painting, and that was my background. And so I will find inspiration for everything within that. Our image boards often have a little snippet of a piece of art that has a color or a palette that really works together. And there have been masters that have really studied this and put time in, so you see the balance of things, and that is a nice launch pad for that.
So you're using art that you're inspired by as a launch pad. It's not necessarily art in your client's collection. It's art that you want to capture the spirit of.
Well, every project's different, and you do have clients that come to you with a collection, and sometimes you are inspired to create that backdrop from the art. Sometimes you need to create a neutral backdrop, knowing that the art is so varied. So I think our work is fairly toned down so that where you want the art to stand out, you can, or when you want it to recede, you can. And it's definite balancing act in how that works. And in residential work, you are creating somebody else's home, right? You're not living in that, and you want to make sure that that backdrop reflects a little bit about them, and their art is, their choices that they've made can help inspire that too.
When we start a project, we always think about where the art will be going when we're doing our space planning and what places need art to make the room come together. We can zone it to what's absolutely crucial, what's secondary, and what's added embellishment and riches. We do sometimes have clients who come with things and we have to literally figure out where they're all going and put the pieces of the puzzle together. But more often than not, we're in the fortunate position that we have clients who are adding a residence. They're not replacing something. So they have nothing to put in it, and we're working with them to put the whole thing together. And of course, that's a wonderful opportunity for exploration for us and for them to become educated further and to be stretched.
So that opens a question. How often would you say you have clients who come with a collection already in place, and how often are you helping them form or add to their collection?
I would say it's only 10, 15, or 20% that they come with a collection.
Really?
Yeah. Most of the time we're buying new. I think one or two of the pictures we have here is a longtime client, which we did move some things from another place, but the house wasn't planned around that. Things changed a little, and there's a Calder mobile that's quite imposing and quite impressive, and it was in a room, installed in a room in another residence that nobody ever went into anymore. So it made sense. Okay, well, let's move it into this other place. But the Lichtenstein it hangs in front of it, and they have such a lovely dialogue together, was purchased for that space.
Yeah, I think when you create a holistic space, it is nice to be able to start with the blank canvas and have that ability to use the walls and the ceiling, everything in the space composed, right? That is your complete art form. So the layers of things that go into it, including fine art, are working together. All those elements work together. And having that blank canvas is a little intimidating for me, but I like having that too, and being asked to get that personal with people's artwork is incredible.
And I think for our experience is that most of our clients who have collections, I wouldn't really call them collectors because the things are being purchased for specific spots and they don't tend to move around. So they're furnishers who can have a collection. Mm-hmm. So it's something unique, I think, for interior designers to deal with for the most part. We have worked a couple of times with, in conjunction with art consultants, and who are quite insistent that there be ways to change things around, and we go through these elaborate exercises for custom hanging rods and rails, and then to power them. The power is really an issue for changeability and flexibility and not doing fixed picture lights and things. Mm-hmm. But the reality is they're never going to change. It's going to stay there.
I worked on a very old A1 heritage property outside of London, and we worked with a great art consultant there, Bianca Arabene from Sotheby's, who was able to go through the residence and identify pictures that were in closets and such, where the previous owner, this was an inherited home, and the previous owner had just probably hundreds of extremely old, expensive masters in closets and things like that, because he didn't want the sun to fade them. So he, I guess, enjoyed having them, but wanted them to be protected, I guess, for resale value, and whoever came into the home, he didn't want the kids to throw spaghetti at them or whatever. And so they were not really even utilized or enjoyed in the home, which was such a problem. And so we used as many of those in a particular project, even though that client didn't consider themselves a collector because it was inherited works. But in other homes, we often indeed start from scratch and develop the types of art and the locations and the various styles. And in one particular client loves to collect Grayson Perry, the cartologist's works, and then the son likes to put little pin dots on the maps to sort of, name the streets and that sort of thing. I think that's a rather expensive sort of child's play, to do such a thing, but you have to have fun with art, right?
You have to live with it. As
You have to live with it and have fun and make it work for you. And if, a wonderful piece becomes child's play, at least it's being appreciated and it's being admired.
That makes me wonder, you talk about art consultants who are working to build collections, and your goal is to actually create spaces that are livable and warm and inviting. So are you ever kind of at loggerheads, if that's the right term? The art consultant or the art?
One of the projects which is up on the screen is the Shinola Hotel that we did in Detroit, and that was the developer of that wanted to make sure that this hotel felt like the sort of the living room for Detroit, that people could come in and experience stuff. So they had started the whole process with a really healthy art budget. They wanted people to experience art, local art, and art from all over. And so one of the spaces, a double height living room that had a perfect backdrop for salon-style art. And Christine and I tend to prefer modern art, and we found a local team to work with, Library Street Collective, who were great. And it was this really interesting, amazing process of sorting through the artwork and laying it out and figuring out how all of that worked. And there were some last-minute things thrown in, which, as a designer, you're trying to compose the whole room, and when things shift, it can give you a little bit of a little perspective pushback. But I think at the end of the day, it was nice that there was that healthy back and forth there in that case.
This is the space, I think, Michelle.
Yes.
On
Yeah, that's it. So how do you handle it when a consultant really wants to drive the bus in terms of the mentality and profile of the art, and you've designed the space and don't think that they naturally go together?
I mean, look, we're all in a very nice place, right? Our business is a luxury business. People are asking our opinion on things, and there's ways of being polite and also being direct. And our opinion is our opinion. That's what it is. Who's to say whether we're right or wrong? You and I could design a room two different ways, two beautiful spaces, and someone could come in and be like, "Oh, I like that one better than that." And I think that you just, at the end of the day, it's so subjective, and you can make reasons for why that is, and sometimes they're right, but I don't know. Art is so subjective, and how people live. I've often been surprised by some of the art that I walk into in homes that we've designed, and the blank wall is now having something, and it can be, oh, that was an interesting choice. But a lot of the times you try and work with that because you are composing an overall design.
My experience hasn't been so much with disagreements about the art, the aesthetics of the art. It has to do usually with scale. What's our book called? Bold, The Interiors of Drake Anderson. I tend to like overscaled things, and sometimes an art advisor will strongly
Postage
feel that
stamps,
something, that this is the perfect piece, and it may be, but not for that position, and then it's overwhelmed or it's lost on the wall. The other thing that I felt...
Who wins that battle?
Sometimes them, sometimes me. The other thing is that, that lamp, you can't have a lamp there, it'll block the painting. And it's like, but this is a residential interior. This is not a museum or a gallery. As you move around it, you will see it still. You'll capture it all. And living with art is a layered thing, a layered experience, and it's just a richer reality. And we generally, you can't live in a room that's just lit from the ceiling.
Jamie, do you ever walk into a space that you've designed and, installations is sort of a ritual? You lay out the carpets, you lay down there's a process that you go through, but the art gets layered in, the lamps, the accessories, and there's that sort of last minute call, right? To be like, well, maybe that should go over there and this, everything. And I get the planning and then you have to move the picture light or the light has to change, but there is that, we can only go so far virtually. You have to stand in a space and experience it. And so that last 10% push, we change our minds too, right?
Yeah.
It's
Or you are in agreement, and the clients are in agreement, and then someone's auntie, Stella, I think it should go over there, and then, they feel that they really need to acquiesce to the relative, and all of a sudden you're getting a call to move the art, and there's no picture light and all that stuff, right?
But ultimately, you can live with it. You can set yourself free, just like they're going to whatever, put their feet up on the sofa. And,
Yeah. You get your pictures first because you never know what's going to happen after you've walked out the door.
Speaking of that, do you ever stage projects with art before and get them documented and then let the clients?
No. I haven't.
I'd rather say
I
no
haven't.
comment.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's not true. Only if I have done that before. I've done it in England where the client did not want anyone to see the value of their art collection. So we had some prints that we just put in their place, yeah.
And we've had
public,
to do that
public view.
with clients allowing us to photograph it, but they wouldn't allow the art. Oh,
Yeah.
With technology today, we photoshopped it in.
Oh.
Photoshopped different pieces in. With the permission of the galleries, who got the
Okay.
permissions from the artists.
And
I
you,
remember
John?
when David Rockefeller's townhouses were for sale a few years ago, and you looked at $25 million house, but you looked at some of those interior spaces, and all the artwork was X'd out. So no matter how valuable that house was, the artwork in the house is clearly far more valuable.
Well, there's a recent article of one of our colleagues, our contemporaries, who got in a bit of a jam about it because the project was published, and when it was, some lost art was depicted in the shoot. So there was a question of the art having been relocated for the, yeah.
So don't trust what you see in magazines, but
Yeah.
you can trust what you see in the galleries behind you. That's the real
Yes,
thing.
yes.
They Photoshop all the light fixtures out.
Right.
So
Yeah.
remember, when you look at those pictures, there's a little something going on there.
Outlets too. And
Yes, thank God for
Switches,
that.
outlets.
Thank God for that.
Cord management.
Talk about art that you. So, can you name one extraordinary piece that you had the pleasure of deploying in a space and how it made you feel?
I love this. I'm going to mispronounce the name. It's like Beyond Alvin Javier. It's actually in one of those pictures there. It's a blue sort of painting, and it has an ombre effect of all these little petals. I really, really particularly loved that piece. Yeah.
Did it transform the room in a way that surprised you?
It takes a very traditional room and just adds a sense of modernity to it, because it is such a large. My New York accent, large. Sorry, just because it is such a large piece over a sofa that's very traditional, it just kind of changes the light and mood, and I really, really love it. And I wish I could buy it myself one day. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I really, really wish I could buy that from them one day. Yes.
When you, it's interesting, right? Art can really change the timbre of the room, whether it's a traditional space, it can be enlivened, and very traditional art can actually add a lot of gravitas to a more contemporary space.
Yeah, it's because it's got that sort of tension that creates interest, I think.
Yeah.
I would have to answer that question with what appears in Here Over a Sofa as the Warhol 9 Marilyn's Reversal series. And that was bought actually a number of years ago for this client. And just as you said, it was a project I did for them that was to be really totally traditional furniture. And the client originally wanted to do something different that I didn't think was really the best idea for the art. But I said, well, you know what, why don't we, that's an interesting idea, but why don't we instead, I get what you want to do, why don't we look at really iconic 20th century contemporary masterpieces, so you know you're living not in a museum, but you're living in a moment in time that's hundreds of years forward, and that's really iconic, so that people who don't even know art can recognize it. Mm-hmm. You see a Warhol, you know it's a Warhol, you know it's Marilyn, whether you don't even know it's Warhol. It conveys the message. So it first lived in this. Up on the, you swept up the stairs, and there was a great gilded console with French bronze sconces on a traditional room, and then over it was this Warhol, and it was just like, wow, okay, and it was spectacular. Mm-hmm. And then when the client sold that house, we moved it out to this other house, even though there had been another painting there, but it was less important, and still even here it looks sensational, and it's just so iconographic, and it's such a fabulous moment of Warhol's.
John, your piece?
It's an artist who I like, but don't necessarily attach to necessarily. This the story behind it. A client had bought a 14-foot KAWS sculpture, and he lived in Soho. And so, if anybody knows, like getting a crane in Soho and blocking off the time to have it lifted on top of a building, and this was I think a 7 or 8 stories up. So you had an enormous crane blocking off Prince Street for full morning, and it was like the scene from La Dolce Vita where, Christ is being flown in on the helicopter. This KAWS sculpture, which is unboxed down the street, comes up over, and I'm actually watching this on video. I'm on the West Coast. Christine's on site.
Very nervous.
And we see this bright green Gumby go flying over the building, and it's being lowered down onto the site. And I'm getting the blow-by-blow shot of this, and there have been all sorts of trouble before, and there's like these guys on the rig that are like, everyone's falling in love with them. It's like wall-to-wall muscles, like jumping up, like trying to adjust things. And finally the piece comes down and lands onto the outdoor terrace where it's going to live. And the platform was specifically designed for it. It's meant to rotate. There were special brackets designed so that it could withstand the wind. And so it finally rests on its little spot. And the art installers, who are, ultimate professionals, are saying, well, where are the little lug nuts to wrap it up? And everyone's like, I don't know, where are the lug nuts? So everyone's looking around, they're checking the box, everything's going around. And they're saying, look, if we don't have these, we're going to have to take this down, we're going to have to put it back, we're going to have to come back another day. We know it's going to be at least 6 months to get the street closure, all of that. And the owner is there. And the owner grabs some tool and is like, fuck it. And basically grinds down the little screws, grabs some lug nuts that these guys have in their thing, and he screws it on. He's like, good, we're done. Wow. And it was just one of those incredible moments where the guy just was like, let's do it. And I appreciated his gutsy move, and I can't imagine how much he paid for that, but it was so fun to see that. And I'm watching on a little video screen from West Coast, and it was just amazing. So that was a great memory.
And hopefully there's been no wind since, right?
No, he's still there. He's faded a little bit, but he's still there.
Right.
It's so funny, hoisting in New York.
Our rigging.
I sort of have a variation on that, which it was like Saturday or Sunday. I live here in the neighborhood where all the galleries are, and Denazy Corey was craning off their roof where they were then some enormous Deborah Butterfield bronze horses, and I saw them coming down. They were just being deinstalled from a show. And I said, oh my God, these would be perfect for this project I'm working on. And this client would love these. And just seeing them craned off, sure enough, they bought both of them.
Gallerists out
The
there.
deals we do on the city streets.
Where do you get your inspiration?
Yeah.
It falls out of
From
the
everywhere.
sky.
From everywhere.
That's a great story. I was going to say it's an argument also for collecting prints, not sculpture, because much of the material here doesn't require craning, but sometimes craning can be a good thing. What is your relationship to prints? I mean, you're talking about the Maryland, multiples. It's
So that's a painting.
Yeah.
But in that, in the original house, there's a photo of Jasper John's 0 through 9 series hanging over a grand French. So yeah, there we are. So that was the house, and that's it yanks you. You know you're not in a museum, even though other things are of the ilk and of the embodiment of totally the historic 18th and 19th century, and they were the perfect choice for there. And they, at the time, were a fairly reasonable way to make a big, huge, bold statement. Filling that wall and making sure you were yanked into the present.
I feel like, prints in a way, when I was talking about the democratization of the art world, prints, I think the market has determined that a great collectible piece is that one trophy, right? And it's just that one person can have ownership of it. But actually multiples, whether we were talking about photography before, Joy, multiples prints are really, wonderful artworks in their own right, and a great way to get, relative bang for your buck.
I think artists are most pleased when they can create something that more than one person can have and hold. And I think that that's truly the value of a print versus a painting.
And how wonderful just walking the aisles. I haven't done the whole fair yet, but to see such great real art that is fairly reasonable, and you don't have to buy something that's, as I call it, a client will show me something. Oh, that's art. I put quotations around it. It's not really art. It's not by an artist. It's just something that's decorative. It could be attractive, and maybe that's subjective and snooty, but I have this sort of innate feeling for what constitutes art, and it could be an emergent artist, it could be an artist I've never seen before, or what's not. But here you can buy from emergent artists and get big impact for very little.
I agree.
I think what's interesting too is that printmaking drawings are coming from a different part of the artist's mind when they're creating the work. It's a lot of artists that have a specific medium that they're familiar with are then left into the hands of a printmaker to adapt their style and technique. These things are a little more like etching or monopoint, which you're drawing, and as an artist, I love, that's what I love to see. But when you have to put yourself into the hand of a printmaking facility that is translating your artwork and seeing how that develops and how the color and the layering of the different elements of that are worked together, it really transforms your art into a different element. It's not necessarily your opus painting that you've done, but it is an expression of who you are as an artist and how you handle that and how you treat those elements. So I've always been drawn to prints and drawings as a medium because I think that it challenges artists to show their work, and when you're seeing their broad scope, you can see how they deal with that. And some deal better than others, and some create with work that is completely different than what their other art might be. And just walking around here, seeing art that I was drawn to, didn't even recognize that the artist that I'd known had done it. So it was really interesting.
Are you deploying prints? How often, or what was the most recent successful deployment of a group of prints?
Let's see, a deployment of a group of prints. I would, let's see, I got a Raymond Pettibon for myself recently because I just love his work and I can't afford to buy one of his watercolors, and I find the same gestural techniques and things like that I love to be so powerful. So that, and I think that to Jamie's point, there's parts of a home that don't always need to be the main focal point, and to bring color and scale and proportion to areas, it's nice to have that option.
We just recently installed a project for a business, a full floor, 42,000 square foot floor on the upper east side, and we didn't do the interiors. The interiors were completely done and expensively done, and they were so dead and they were so flat, and they had no art, and they were kind of dead to begin with. Beautiful quality, but there was just no energy at all in the design. And they hired us just purely to do art and accessories, and except for a few key places where we used paintings and originals and a commissioned. No, the commission thing didn't even go through. That's right. Cut for budget reasons. The rest of it, all of it was done with prints and works on paper, and which I discovered at going to fairs and dealers I've worked with, and so the entire space was. I mean, it must have been 300-400 pieces of art we bought and framed and installed.
And I think that's the benefit of prints as well, because they are typically much more inexpensive. They're much more accessible. You're able to really have a client or a residential space or a business space have more of a rotating art program. So the space appears to change more frequently because the work is affordable, I think, which is a nice...
Just sitting here, some of the work came from Bernard Jacobson, some of it came from Sharks Inc., some of it came from some of the other galleries here.
We placed your favorite galleries close.
Yes,
Close
exactly.
proximity.
In your viewing pleasure, Jamie, yes.
Right, Bernard Jacobson, they represent William Tillier. He's a mature British artist. I mean, when I say mature, he's in his 80s, I think. And he's highly respected, highly revered. His paintings are costly, but this set of 8 prints, I've used it in a few different installations. They look fabulous, they're intriguing, they're interesting, they're from a serious artist, and I don't know what, they're $1,200 each or something?
See, yeah.
So
Revolving
that's
art
buying
program.
real art, not...
When you talk about a space being dead, that space being dead until you installed the art, so tell me,
Close your eyes that there's anything behind us. Just look at it. Kind of looked like this, done very high end.
so good art can transform a great space? Can bad art destroy a great space?
Oh, heavens, yes. Oh, yeah, it can. Maybe not visually, but how it makes you feel. I think art for me is definitely emotional. So I think even if the room itself is okay, if you have a horrendous piece of art, you want to kill yourself. I mean, I hope you don't really want to kill yourself, but it could just make you feel so bad, like, ew, like, get me out, right?
I think it's more context too, right? Because bad art, good design, I think it's all the context of how things go together and how one translates. And sometimes contrast really works. You can have a beautiful, clean, modern interior with an old master hung on the wall, and you're just like, wow, what
yourself.
a great...
Yeah.
Oh, well, I was going to say what a great move.
Oh, okay, sorry.
It's to each his own. But I think that there's that balance between how things work, that contrast does help. I think that when you see something that's just so obviously out of place, like a sore thumb, and just as having an eye for design and visual cues to be like, that's just not... I mean, anyone in there would be... Grab anyone from the audience. This isn't right. This is just not the right thing. I'm not sure why you did that. Maybe Aunt Selma told you to put it there again, and it was just the reason. And from a very subjective and also objective point of view, like, that just doesn't work. And that can be irritating when you're composing something that's meant to have a very holistic feel to it.
You would imagine, though, that the people that come to the three of you as clients would have the eye or the sense to listen to you?
Wouldn't you imagine that?
One would think so, right?
But occasionally it doesn't work out that way.
It usually does.
intimidating.
It usually does work.
It usually does work
Yeah.
out, but I totally, I find that, it's rare, luckily, but occasionally a client will say, I have no interest in art. I literally have no interest in art. I'm not going to spend money on art, and I don't even want your involvement in it, but I'll buy a couple of things. And you see things that are just so cheesy
Yeah.
that they put on the walls. It really does kind of, at least for me, ruin the room that we did a beautiful job.
This art by the square foot, when that conversation comes up, is usually a sign that we're looking at it for the wrong reasons. There's this huge piece that'll cover this wall, and it's only blank, and you're like, okay, well, if it's $1 and it's great, terrific, but if it's,
$1,
are we really
yeah.
talking about art by the square foot? That seems like the wrong method of working.
Let's go back in time. Sort of the first artwork, if we can, that sort of resonated with you, and why it resonated.
I was always drawn to color and color combinations, and I remember just being fascinated by a Gene Davis show that was at MoMA, and in the gift shop I bought a Gene Davis double-sided jigsaw puzzle that was encased in acrylic with a sliding top so you could open it and then finish, and then I used it as a tray for tea parties.
This was your first act as a collector.
Yes,
I love it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
In the old days of New York, in the West Village, Peter Max would stand on the corners near Barrow Street, and he had a spinning disc where he would drop the paint and create art on the sidewalk. I think I was probably 7 or 8 years old, and he gave me one of his little pieces. I, didn't know that it would later in life have any value, so probably around the age of 12, I threw it out. But that was always something that I really enjoyed, and that was the first piece of art where I really was able to. I didn't buy it; he gave it to me, but that really excited me a great deal. Peter Max.
I love Peter Max. I mean, the early Peter Max is so incredible. That color, I mean, it's
he would just stand there
perfect
spinning
for the time.
colors, and just giving them out to people. It was like amazing. So yeah, I wanted to kick myself later, 20 years later, realizing that I probably could have gotten at least $25 for it.
I'd say one of the most landmark paintings for me was a painting my parents had. It's an Ami Phillips Girl in a Red Dress, which was this hang over the sofa for many years. And it's it's almost modern in its own take. It was done in the 1800s, and he's an American portrait artist that would travel around New England and do portraits of people, but they all kind of remarkably looked very similar. He had this kit of parts that he would use and recycle. And so it was really graphic and modern, and I having grown up in a home of Americana and folk art, which I have completely gone 180 degrees away from. I think that my reaction, my seeing the abstract in that really led me to really loving 20th century modernism. So influential, not my favorite work, but like it really helped me see how the flattening out of art and space changed things, and really pushed me when I started looking at modern art. I was like, oh my God, I totally get it. This is
And you're
amazing.
still talking about Alex Katz. You mentioned him before. You're making me think of Alex Katz.
Exactly. I'm looking at the girl in the red coat over there.
Right, and that's like over the sofa growing up. This is your rosebud.
Your rosebud. I really want a Calum Innes piece. That's what I really want. Nice,
will you
big,
go?
bold graphics. But I don't think he's doing prints yet. Yeah.
Well, afterwards we should go and shop. If anyone wants to tag along, they're going to shop the fair, and we'll see what they each purchase on their way out the door.
I am shopping after this.
Clients.
Well, I know we're coming close to the end of our talk, but I wanted to sort of ask if anyone had a question for them. Now's your opportunity. We'll go Joanna first. I don't know if maybe I'll walk this over.
Oh, that's
You can,
I saw Tony last night at a school event, and I, in passing, mentioned that we had just bought a piece of art, and I said I don't know that I would have spent that much on a piece of furniture and so I was just curious if you could comment on that, on sort of how you guys look at art in a budget if you actually are collecting. I don't have any famous old masters or Warhols, but I was just curious about your sense of sort of the long-term value of art and furniture. I don't know if you can comment on that.
I would say buy art you love,
always.
and not ever plan on selling it.
Right, the
And
long
I'd
term
say
is the pleasure.
just enjoy it. So whatever the cost is to you, I think is an emotional thing. Nobody, it's the emperor's new clothes when people tell you have to buy this to put it in a collection. It's ridiculous. You should buy art that you love, that works for that. And people are, there's many people out there who are willing to tell you about the history of art and understand why these are different. But budgets are, art can be, like I said, it's $1 or $1 billion. People make decisions based on emotion, I think, and connection to art rather than investment necessarily.
But the other side of that question is kind of $20,000 on a print versus $20,000 on a sofa. What's the?
That's cheap for a sofa, Tony.
Yeah. Well, you can't take any of it with you, so just buy what you love, and it just is what it is.
I mean, I think as far as furniture, we all need the furniture to sit on.
To enjoy the art.
Nourishes our soul and invigorates our thought processes, but you gotta furnish and then be lucky to struggle to put art on the wall. And again, if it is a choice, then you need to work a little bit harder to find stuff that you can afford that isn't going to blow your budget. But then you're really taking a gamble. There's no investment quality. I think when clients ask about investment, it's like I said, we're not talking about investment level here. If you're spending $500,000 and up, we can talk about investment level. But at $20,000, $30,000, it's all a flyer on a chance.
Also, I always believe that the right frame can really change the personality of a piece. It can either elevate it or degrade it. So if you get an inexpensive piece of art and you have a truly majestic matting process and framing, it could make something, found at an estate sale look amazing.
That's exactly. Or hanging a gallery wall of inexpensive pieces is also another way to give them visual
Impact.
Is there a question over there?
So you were speaking a bit about how a piece of bad art can really ruin how a room makes you feel. And a pre-existing collection of art can be a highly personal thing. Maybe you can speak a little bit about what it's like navigating these pre-existing collections of clients' artwork. being such a personal endeavor and thing.
It can be painful. I've actually got a project there from London, and there's some pieces. There it is, that piece right there. Man, oh man, of Javits. I mean, there's some old stuff in that house that I just thought, oh my God, can we put this in the barn? And, but it was important to the grandfather or something, so it had to have pride of place in the home. And it's one of those examples where I just really had to just bite my tongue and just say, okay, do whatever. Because, they're going to do whatever they want when you walk out the door anyway. But really being encouraged to hang something that you really don't care for, that isn't your personal taste, sometimes can really be, a bit of a challenge. Yeah.
I think it's interesting because you are, as someone who's tasked with managing the aesthetics of someone's life, right? There are things that we come up, handicap conditions, people are colorblind, you have bad art. Grandma's chair that I love, that it's gonna be in this apartment, so figure out where it's going. And you could say, all right, great, we don't have to work together. But most times you're gonna say, hey, look, all right, I'm not living here. I understand you're attached to this. Let's be the best editor that we can to make these things work. Let's see how we could complement this so that, whereas it might not be my favorite thing, I can make it work within a space, right? We're all talented enough to be like, how do we turn the, this into something special? And we'll smoke and mirrors, right? Little flower vase in front of it next to the thing, and there's ways of doing it. So
Design politics.
Yeah, it's furniture as well as art. I find people get attached to, and that's you're going through people's drawers and looking at all their personal lives. You kind of have to help them sort through that in a good way.
Well, Jamie, you put your microphone down, but I want to ask you, you surely have, before you get to that point where we can make it work, what's your tactful approach to the collector whose collection you can't stand?
I don't know that I'd ever say I've had a complete collection I can't stand.
Or a piece.
I think it's about trying to maybe put it in a place that's less prominent. Another way of putting it is let's have you live with it in a new way and put it instead of over the living room mantle or sofa, the important places. Why don't we change it up and you can experience it in a different way, and this piece will work better there.
Got it. Yeah.
In the barn.
The powder room. We spend a lot of time there. Everyone will visit it and see it.
Rooms are important.
Yes.
Well, great. On that note, on the powder room note, we're going to stop before we really devolve. But I want to thank you three for joining us today. And I want to
Thank you very
all
much.
for
Thank you
joining
for
us
your
today.
time. Thank you for the luxury of your time.